Hello everyone, my name is Eli Thompson. I'm the founder of Tensegri-Teach, dynamic teaching tools. I'm here to talk to you about the Tensegri-Teach Pelvis, which is based on Tom Fleming's design of his Tensegrity Pelvis. He did a wonderful job. It's a beautiful design, and I really am grateful to have been able to follow in his footsteps. So, the pelvis assembly is a bit trickier than the 6 dowel or the 12 dowel, but it's not that hard. If you follow the video, repeat as you need to, pause as you need to complete each of the steps, work carefully, and you'll be able to assemble it just fine. So before we move on to assemble the video, I'd like to point out a few features of a Tensegrity pelvis that are valuable. While it is not an anatomical representation of the pelvis, it illustrates the functional relationships of gait quite well. As we create a gait through the pelvis, we will see that there are three major movements within the planes. First, there is a torquing, a wringing out, a twisting of the pelvis. If we look at the right side, as I take a left foot forward step, we'll see that the right ilium, or these, anteriorly tilts, while the left ilium posteriorly tilts. That is a twisting of the pelvis, a torque. And so that happens contralaterally. Also, if we look at these horizontal, we'll see that as we create that gait, there is a side-to-side tilt of the pelvis, or a sachet. And finally, if we look at the top of the pelvis, imagine that that is the sacrum, we will see that there is a rotation happening through the pelvis as we walk. These are all natural manifestations of gait and very valuable. If any one of them is compromised, for whatever reason, we will either have an increased movement elsewhere or a reduced overall function. And so it's beneficial to look at someone's gait, look at their movements, and imagine this Tensegrity pelvis, or use it as an educational tool to describe to the clients about the dysfunction. So I hope you enjoy it, I hope it's valuable to you, and let's go assemble it. Okay, so in your kit of the Tensegrity pelvis, you received 4 full dowels, 5 half dowels. You received 7 rubber bands and 18 or so caps. If you're missing any of these components, just email me and I will send the supplements to you. Okay, so the first step of assembling the pelvis is to put 4 rubber bands on the 4 long dowels. The way we do it is we place the flat aspect of the rubber band into the slot, like so, and then like a bow and arrow, pull it and insert it into the other side, making sure that it is flat on the dowel. And then we need to also balance it. If this was unbalanced, one side tighter than the other, when I pulled from the center on both sides, it would come out unevenly. And so it's quite clear that this is uneven. You know, this side is too long while this side is too short. And so we have to pull the rubber band back over to the short side and retest. And I think this is still a bit longer. And so I'll pull a little bit more. That looks pretty even. Okay? So we need to do that with all 4 long dowels, making sure that each one of them is balanced. Okay, now that we have our 4 long dowels with the rubber bands on them nice and evenly balanced, we can start the assembly. We're going to take 3 of our dowels and organize them into this kind of a shape, an H. We're going to put them together by taking the band of the top band of one, inserting it into the slot of the horizontal dowel, and then using a cap locking it into place. Now, placing the caps on can be a little tricky. An easy way of doing it is to take the cap, put it diagonally, obliquely onto the slot, and then push it into place. Okay. So again, take the cap, put it right on the edge of the slot, and then push it into place, twisting to lock it in. If you don't twist, it doesn't get locked. Untwisting to take it off. Okay. So we'll go ahead and create this shape by inserting the bands into the slots, putting the cap diagonally on the slot, pushing it into place, twisting it on, and the same with this side. And twisting it on. We want to make sure that they are evenly distanced from the edge of the vertical dowels. Okay, so I see that this might be a bit longer than that. I'm going to loosen, untwist the cap a bit, draw the band through, and then lock it back into place. Okay? So why don't you go ahead, pause the video, and complete that step. Okay, welcome back. So the next step is going to be adding the 4th long dowel to this shape here underneath. We're going to mirror the horizontal dowel by placing it underneath. An easier way of doing it would be to flip our shape over so that the horizontal dowel that's already in place is at the bottom and the vertical dowels are now on top with the free band freely available to add this dowel in. So we slip the bands into the slot and put the caps on, and there we are. Okay, so we want to make sure that the top dowel is at the same position as the other one, that they're directly above each other. And so I see that it is a bit too far this way. I'm going to slide it in, loosen the cap a bit, slide it down, twist it back on. Okay, and there we have it. Okay, so why don't you pause the video and complete that step. Okay, so the next step is to start adding the half dowels. Right now our shape, our H, is pretty two-dimensional. Yeah, it's got a little three-dimensionality based on the thickness of the dowels, but really it's a two-dimensional shape. By adding the half dowels, we're really going to expand this into 3 dimensions. What we're going to do is we're going to place the half dowels in between these 2 bands, here and here. Okay, so I like to take the bottom band, pull it out, slip it into the slot, like so, and then grab the top one, pull it up, and place it on. like so. Okay? And so it expands the structure. And we're going to place the other one here between this band and this band. And so we can do that like that. Okay. We could put caps on these right now. However, we'll need to take them off later because there's going to be another band that comes into these slots as well. So you can place the caps on if you would like, and that will give it a little stability, or you can leave them off and maintain adaptability. The thing we do want in order to balance the structure, and we want to balance at each step, is to make sure that these dowels are the same distance on either side, from here to here, and the same distance from the femurs. In a sense, these vertical dowels are the femurs of the model, with the feet on this end and the greater trochanter on this end, I suppose we could call it. And so these dowels that create depth in the structure, we could call them the iliums of the pelvis. And so I'm going to shift them over to balance the structure a bit. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so why don't you go ahead and complete that step, and I'll see you when you're done. Okay, so next step would be to add 2 more dowels to the underside of the pelvis, here and here, mirroring these 2 dowels. Okay, we have these 2, in a sense the iliums we call them, on the top of the pelvis. We need to add them to the bottom, which we could call the ramus. Okay, so in order to do that, it would be easier to tip the pelvis onto its sacrum, with the feet flopping up into the air. And then we can take our half dowels and insert them, the free bands that are now underneath, into the slots of the dowels on both sides, like so. Okay. Now we want to balance the structure again, and so we will need to have these new half dowels that are directly above the other ones. And so I can slide that over, slide this back a bit, make sure that they line up nicely. Good. So here we have it. Okay, why don't you pause the video and complete that step. Okay, so we're now going to add 2 rubber bands to the feet of the pelvis, uniting these 2 and creating a relationship between them through the bands. So we will take one edge of the band, slip it into this slot, and put a cap on, and the other band into this foot. Put the cap on and twist, like so. So we're not going to leave it dangling like this. We're going to unite these bands via the 5th half dowel. We're going to place both bands into the slot and place a cap on, like so. And So we have now defined the relationship between the feet of the pelvis. It's a very loose one, and we need to make sure it's balanced. We may need to make sure that both sides of the rubber band are even in tension. And so an easy way of doing that, I will create an imbalance first so that you can see. Easy way to test it would be to pull the feet apart. And as we pull the feet apart, you'll see that one side becomes taut a lot faster than the other side. Okay? And so I need to lengthen the taut side. Give it a bit more slack. Let's see how that. So as I pull it apart, better. You can still see that this side is a bit looser than the other. So I'll do it a little more. And I saw the same thing with the other side. Okay, let's test it. Okay, that's pretty good. I like that. Okay, so why don't you pause the tape and complete that step. Okay, so now that we've created a relationship between the feet of the model, we will need to create a relationship between the greater trochanters of the model. So we'll flip the model over and put the last rubber band that we have between the two greater trochanters and twist the cap on. And like so, and of course we need to test it to see if it's balanced. Okay, so here it is. How do we test it? Well, let's just grab the middle of the bands and pull them wide. Not bad, but I think this side is a bit longer than the other side. So I will balance it. Yeah, maybe a bit more. Okay, so making sure that those are twisted on, ready. Okay. Why don't you go ahead and pause the video and complete that step. Okay, so now we start getting into the tricky part of this assembly. So far, it's been somewhat straightforward. Now, it's going to get a bit trickier. What we're going to do is we're going to take the bands that are relating the femurs, the greater trochanters of the model together, so this top band, and we're going to relate it down to the iliums, okay, by drawing it downwards to them. So an easy way of doing it is use your thumb and finger to grab the bands about a quarter of the way towards the greater trochanter. Pull them wide. Use your fingers to pull the half dowel up to the band and insert the band in place. like so. Okay, we took the top band and we pulled it down to the femur on both sides, the front and the back of the model, to create this. Okay, we'll do it on this side as well. Use your thumbs, pull it wide, fingers to grab the ilium, slip the band in place, like so. Okay, and I see the bands are getting a little tangled up here, and so I will straighten them out. We don't want any tangled messes. Okay, and here. Okay. So to balance this, we want to look at the half dowels. We'll see that this one got pulled. They both got pulled a bit inwards here. So I could slide them over. To fix that. The other thing to look at is these triangles that are now formed. And we have a triangle with these bands and the half dowel right here. Okay, and here. And we want to make them somewhat even. Okay. Yep. Okay, so there we go. There's many other things we'll need to do to balance the structure later on, but for now, why don't you pause the video and complete this step. Okay. Okay, welcome back. The next step is very similar to the one we just completed. Rather than taking the top band and relating it to these dowels, we're going to take the bottom band between the feet and relate it to the bottom half dowels of the model, to the ramus. Yeah? And so, in order to do that, we need to make sure that that bottom band is not twisted. Let's untwist that. Okay. And we're going to take this and bring it down to this half dowel. And so, the process is the same. Take the band in my thumbs, and I draw it down while using my fingers to draw up that half dowel and insert it into place, like so. Okay. So we've got the band that went from the feet right across to the pubis, and so now it's going from the feet to the ramus to the pubis. On both sides, front and back. Okay. So we'll need to do it on this side as well. Use my thumbs, widen the band, draw it downwards, use my fingers to pull up the half dowels. Yep. And insert it into place. There we go. So, let's create an imbalance. Okay, we need to balance the structure now. It's starting to look quite nice, quite representative of the pelvis we're hoping to complete, but it's starting to get pulled in different directions. And so, we can see that this dowel is being pulled inwards, And if we compared these lengths, they're all different. And so we want to balance them out. We're going to pull, whoops, put that back in, pull that back. And actually, let me show you this as well. So it's not only this band from the pubis to the ramus, but it's also here from the ramus to the horizontal dowel. I'm not sure what to call that one, but we can see that this relationship is a lot shorter than this relationship, and so we're going to want to balance that out. Okay, and we can flip it over and check the other side. The other side's okay. Good. And then looking straight down, we can see these are a bit shorter than these two. So I'm going to balance that a bit. The funny thing about balancing a tensegrity model, as soon as you balance one thing, it pulls other things out of alignment because of global change. We see that this X is now relatively well balanced, but this is a little less balanced now. This is shorter than that again. I will lengthen this side a bit, but not too much. Okay? And we can inspect the back, the other side, and balance that. Okay? And once we've completed that, we can put the caps onto these lower half dowels and lock them into place. We might need to loosen them later on in order to balance the model when it's finished, but for now, let's lock them into place and give ourselves a little stability, like so. We have not placed caps on the top half dowels of the pelvis because there's still another step to do there. Okay, so why don't you pause the tape and complete that step. Okay, we are almost finished with assembling our pelvis. It's looking quite nice, but we still have the top of the pelvis to create, to put together. We have this vertical half dowel floating in space here. It's not so good. So what we're going to do is, if you take a close look at the bands running between the two iliums, if this is our pelvis, the feet down there, greater trochanters up here, the ramuses are down here, the half dowels at the bottom, and the half dowels on top could be called the iliums. Okay. Look between the two iliums and you'll see that it's a double band. There's two bands running through there. We're going to take one of these bands on either on the front and the back and relate them to the vertical half dowel. Now, in order to do that, one of these bands is much tighter than the other. If you take the inner bands, you may find that they don't make it all the way in. It's too tight. That's because the inner bands are the ones going around the whole front of the structure and the whole back of the structure. That's a very long way to go, and those rubber bands are pretty stretched. We want to use the rubber band that's going from the greater trochanters down to the iliums and around. That's a smaller circle, so there is more slack available in that band. However, the tricky part is that band is on the outside. We could take the outer bands and pull them in, but they may also be a little too tight. So we'll need to pull a little slack into them. So draw slack into the center of those bands, like so. So I pulled these bands into the center more, away from the graded trochanters, and now they can reach. And I will place them into the slot of the center dowel, like so. We'll need to balance this now. If you look at the iliums of this model, they're now being pulled to the side. And if we look at the X formed at the top between the two iliums, we could call that the sacrum here. The X is oblique. So let's balance that by pulling the bands to the shorter side. Okay. It's a bit better, but the dowels are still off. So if we look at the front band going all the way around the front of the structure, we can see that this between one ilium to the horizontal band and the other ilium to the horizontal dowel, these two areas are different lengths, and so we can balance it that way. I actually prefer it being shorter there. Okay, and so we can flip the model around and look this way, and we'll see that the same thing is happening. This is longer than this, and so we shall shift it. And we see that the top of the structure has become much more even. Of course, as soon as you adjust one thing, everything adjusts in a tensegrity. That's its nature. And so why don't we first put the caps on these, the top of the structure, the iliums and the center structure, and to lock them all in place, and then we'll look to see about balancing the pelvis as a whole. So put all the caps on. There. Okay. Why don't you go ahead and complete that step, and then when you come back, we'll look at balancing the pelvis. Okay, so congratulations, you have completed the assembly of the pelvis, and now we can look at balancing it. It does not have to be balanced, but many people prefer a balanced pelvis. It tends to function better. Okay, so the way to do this is to keep looking around the model from different angles. We can look from the top of the model and look at the spatial relationships between the structures, the distance between the dowels or the shapes that they form, the bands and the dowels form, and try to look for symmetry or imbalance. Here I see that this is turned out a bit. And so I look, where is that imbalance? Is it up top or is it in the front of the structure? Let's turn and look at the front. And if we see any imbalances in the front, that's what we can address. So I see that this is a bit different than this. So I'm going to balance that by shifting it. Okay. I also notice that the bottom part is different. Yeah. So between the horizontal and the ramuses. So I'm going to balance that a bit. There we go. And we can look from the side of the model and try to see, are there any imbalances? Make really small adjustments. If you make a big adjustment, everything's going to change on you, and then you'll have to go back and balance things more. Okay, so you can just keep going around the model searching for what can you balance, what is too short this way, too long that way. Similar to body reading. Okay, so why don't you explore that, experiment. The more you play with the model, the more you shift and adjust, the better you get at balancing it. Okay, so I hope you enjoy the pelvis. I hope you learn a lot by playing with it. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to email me. And I hope your clients find it insightful. Enjoy.